Just 1 minute ago, something happened inside the palace that no one believed possible. Palace guards stood firm, a code was entered, a vault door sealed shut, and Queen Camilla, once untouchable, was denied access to the most protected chamber in the monarchy. But the real shock? The master code had already been transferred to Catherine. And this wasn't a mistake. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The royal vault has never merely been a room, it is the silent heartbeat of the crown, the place where power is preserved long after ceremonies fade and headlines move on. Within its walls lie documents that shape succession, heirlooms that symbolize continuity, and private directives that define who truly holds influence when no one is watching. Access to that vault is not ceremonial privilege, it is authority distilled into a single decision. Who is trusted with the future of the monarchy when the lights go out and the doors close? So when Camilla approached those doors, expecting routine entry, the atmosphere shifted before a word was spoken. Guards who once stepped aside now stood immovable. Their refusal was not emotional. It was procedural. A new command had been lobbed into the system, and protocol left no room for hesitation. The code she carried no longer unlocked anything. The hierarchy had changed, not publicly, not ceremonially, but structurally. In that suspended moment, the reality settled in. Her authority had been recalibrated without warning. What made the moment seismic was not confrontation, but precision. Hours earlier, Catherine had quietly been granted Master Code status. No announcement, no applause, no ceremony to soften the implications. The transfer had been executed with calculated calm, as though those who arranged it understood the shock it would cause and preferred silence to spectacle. Insiders now whisper that this shift had been prepared for weeks, perhaps months, buried beneath routine meetings and routine smiles. It was not spontaneous, it was strategic. For Camilla, the weight of that realization was heavier than any locked door. She had weathered criticism before. She had endured public scrutiny and political tension. But this was different. This was institutional. It was not about perception. It was about placement. The system itself had adjusted, and she was no longer at its center. The denial did not need to be loud to be devastating. The message was embedded in protocol. Priority had shifted. And hovering above it all is the quiet implication that such a transfer could not occur without approval at the highest level. Decisions surrounding the vault are never delegated casually. They are endorsed, they are authorized, they are final, which means someone with ultimate authority determined that Catherine now embodies the trust required to safeguard the monarchy's most guarded secrets. But here is the truth that makes this moment explosive. This is not about jewels resting in velvet cases. It is not about glittering crowns or ceremonial regalia. It is about high leverage. It is about who holds the keys to continuity. When the master code changed hands, so did the balance of influence inside palace walls. And that shift, quiet though it seemed, may echo louder than any public declaration ever could. But to understand why the vault door closed on Camilla, we must uncover what changed behind palace walls long before this moment erupted into view. Royal codes are never transferred casually. They represent trust, succession, and the inner sanctum of authority. So when Catherine was quietly granted the master code without public announcement, it wasn't just procedural, it was seismic. Because in royal tradition, access equals legitimacy, and legitimacy is everything. So who authorized it? And, more importantly, who knew Camilla would be locked out? Inside the monarchy, the master code is not a simple sequence of numbers. It is the invisible signature that determines who safeguards continuity when uncertainty creeps in. It symbolizes more than entry into a secured chamber. It represents entry into the sovereign's most guarded circle of confidence. The one who holds it does not merely open doors, she carries institutional trust, future planning authority, and the unspoken right to act when others must wait. That is why its transfer is never accidental and never impulsive. It is deliberate, documented, and historically rare. What makes this shift even more unsettling is the secrecy surrounding it. There was no ceremony, no staged announcement to soften the reality. The authorization appeared, buried within routine internal adjustments, masked by the language of operational refinement. Yet those who monitor palace patterns noticed something subtle days before the vault incident. Security protocols were quietly updated. Access logs were recalibrated. Certain staff rotations were reassigned. It looked administrative on the surface, but beneath that calm exterior, something fundamental was being rearranged. At the same time, Catherine's presence in private strategic councils began to intensify. Meetings once limited to senior advisors suddenly included her voice. Discussions about institutional resilience, long-term perception, and internal restructure carried her imprint. She was not stepping forward loudly, she was stepping forward steadily. Observers describe her involvement as measured but firm, focused less on ceremony and more on continuity. And in a monarchy where stability is survival, that difference matters. Camilla, by contrast, reportedly remained unaware of the transition until the moment access was denied. That is where the emotional fracture deepens. This was not a public disagreement. It was a quiet displacement, a change enacted without confrontation, without warning, without space for negotiation. The pain of that realization does not come from spectacle. It comes from silence, from discovering that the system has already moved on before you are told it has shifted. And threading through all of this is the question that no one inside the palace can ignore. Who signed off? Transfers of this magnitude do not occur without sovereign consent. Even if executed through layers of bureaucracy, the decision ultimately traces back to the top. Whispers now circle around a single possibility that King Charles approved the transition, perhaps reluctantly, perhaps strategically, but knowingly. If that is true, then this was not merely administrative housekeeping. It was a calculated recalibration of trust. The emotional undertones ripple far beyond one vault door. They speak of evolving alliances, of legacy protection, of the quiet elevation of one figure, while another feels the ground shift beneath her. And in that silence, suspicion grows stronger, because when legitimacy is reassigned without explanation, it signals preparation. Preparation for what, exactly, remains unclear, but it feels intentional. And if Charles did approve this silent transfer, then the implications go far beyond a vault they strike. At the very core of the crown itself, sources close to the palace claim the decision bore the king's signature, subtle, deliberate, irreversible. If true, this means Charles made a choice between loyalty and legacy, between partnership and permanence, and those who witnessed his recent private meetings say something shifted in him, something heavy, something final, because this wasn't just administrative, it was deeply personal. For years, Charles has walked a delicate line between heart and history. Camilla has been his constant through storms that once threatened to consume them both. Their partnership survived public resistance, institutional doubt, and relentless scrutiny. Yet the crown does not operate on sentiment alone. It demands foresight, it demands stability, and lately, insiders suggest Charles has become increasingly preoccupied with how history will judge the strength of his reign and the endurance of the monarchy beyond him. In recent weeks, late-night council sessions stretched longer than usual. Advisors came and went with tightened expressions. Conversations reportedly circled around continuity, perception, and safeguarding the institution from fracture. The tone was not panic, but calculation. Charles listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was about the future, about ensuring that what he inherited would not weaken under his watch. Those present sensed that he was weighing something profound. At the center of that weighing process stood two women who represent two chapters of his life. Camilla embodies loyalty earned through endurance, a bond forged in adversity. Catherine represents generational renewal, the promise of public confidence, the calm composure that resonates with a watching nation. The contrast is not cruel, it is stark. One reflects the past he fought to protect. The other symbolizes the future he must secure. Observers describe a growing emotional distance between Charles and Camilla in the days leading up to the vault transfer. Not hostility, not confrontation, just silence where certainty once lived. Decisions that once felt shared began to feel unilateral, and when the master code was reassigned, it carried the weight of that silence. It was not only a security adjustment, it was a signal, a quiet endorsement of Catherine as the anchor of continuity. Charles understands public perception better than most. He knows the monarchy survives not merely through tradition, but through trust. Catherine has become a stabilizing force in that equation, composed under scrutiny, aligned with institutional priorities, careful yet confident. Granting her the Master Code was more than symbolic access. It was an affirmation of where the center of gravity is shifting. But with that affirmation comes fracture. Because every elevation casts a shadow, Camilla's exclusion from the vault is not just procedural demotion, it is emotional displacement. It suggests that legacy has taken precedence over loyalty. And if Charles indeed authorized this move, he has chosen to secure tomorrow, even if it unsettles today. That is why this moment feels irreversible. Not because of a code entered into a system, but because of what it represents. A king confronting his own mortality and deciding how history will remember him. The vault door closing on Camilla echoes far beyond steel and stone. It reverberates through relationships, through alliances, through the delicate architecture of royal balance. And the deeper question lingers: if Charles was willing to redraw this line, what other boundaries may shift in the name of legacy? Because once a sovereign chooses permanence over partnership, the consequences rarely remain confined to a single chamber. But while Charles wrestled with legacy, Catherine stepped into a role that would redefine her position forever. Catherine did not demand the Master Code. She did not announce it. She simply received it, and with it, a level of authority rarely handed over before coronation. Insiders say her reaction was calm, focused, resolute, because this wasn't about triumph. It was about responsibility, and responsibility in a monarchy often comes wrapped in silent storms. By the time the transfer was executed, Catherine had already been moving steadily through the inner corridors of palace operations, not loudly, not theatrically, but deliberately. Her presence in high-level discussions had shifted from supportive observer to essential participant. She asked questions that cut to the future. She emphasized continuity over comfort. And while the public saw polished appearances and composed engagements, inside the institution her role was quietly expanding into something far more consequential. What makes her rise compelling is not ambition, but alignment. Those who understand the monarchy's internal mechanics note her growing closeness with Princess Anne's long-term vision for the crown, a vision rooted in discipline, restraint, and institutional endurance. Anne has always valued duty above sentiment, stability above popularity. Catherine mirrors that instinct. Together, they represent a bridge between generations, one grounded in preservation rather than performance. That alignment did not happen overnight. It was cultivated through shared priorities and mutual understanding of what the crown demands when times grow uncertain. Where others might have turned the Master Code into spectacle, Catherine chose discretion. No celebratory gestures, no visible assertion of power. Instead, she folded the authority into her routine, treating it as an obligation rather than a victory. That restraint speaks volumes. In a climate charged with tension, she responded with steadiness. And that steadiness, paradoxically, carries more weight than any dramatic declaration ever could. There has also been a subtle repositioning within ceremonial hierarchies. Seating arrangements adjusted, briefings rerouted, strategic documents passing through different hands. To the outside world, these shifts appear minor. Inside palace walls, they signal recalibration. Authority does not always roar. Sometimes it rearranges quietly, until one day everyone realizes the center has moved. Yet none of this unfolded without scrutiny. Catherine understands the pressure of public expectation. Every gesture is examined, every silence interpreted. Taking on deeper authority while maintaining grace requires emotional resilience that few truly comprehend. She has learned to absorb tension without reflecting it outward, to carry responsibility without broadcasting its weight. That composure is not accidental. It is cultivated, and in moments like this, it becomes essential. Her loyalty, above all, appears anchored in stability. She has shown little interest in personal spotlight when institutional integrity is at stake. That distinction matters. The Master Code was not a trophy placed in her hands. It was a safeguard entrusted to her care, and she has treated it as such, reinforcing the impression that her elevation is rooted in necessity, not rivalry. Meanwhile, the public remains largely unaware of the internal recalibration. Engaging NETs proceed. Statements remain measured. The illusion of seamless continuity persists. Yet beneath that calm surface, a new axis of authority has formed. Catherine stands at its center not by proclamation, but by quiet consolidation. And as she settles into this expanded role, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Every gain for one figure alters the landscape for another. The more Catherine embodies institutional confidence, the more the contrast sharpens elsewhere. Power rarely shifts without consequence. Yet as Catherine solidified her quiet authority, Camilla faced a reality she had never prepared for. She approached the vault expecting routine access. Instead, she was met with silence. Guards stood unmoving. A denial code flashed, and in that suspended second, Camilla understood something irreversible had occurred. For years she had navigated storms, scandals, and resistance, but this was institutional. This was structural. This was removal without announcement. For a fleeting moment, disbelief held her still. This was a door she had passed through before, a threshold that symbolized proximity to the core of royal authority. Access had never been questioned. Protocol had always bent in accordance with her status. Yet now, the very system that once affirmed her position rejected her credentials with clinical indifference. There was no confrontation, no raised voices, just a silent refusal that carried more weight than any public rebuke. Staff members nearby sensed the gravity immediately, eyes lowered, conversations halted mid-sentence. In palaces, humiliation rarely unfolds in dramatic spectacle. It unfolds in subtle shifts of posture and breath. Those who witnessed the moment understood that something deeper than a security error had occurred. This was not technical. It was intentional. The denial was logged, authorized, and irreversible. As the reality settled in, the implications became impossible to ignore. Power had shifted quietly, methodically, and without her consent. No debate. No forewarning. The recalibration had already taken place behind closed doors, and she had only just discovered its consequences. For someone who had fought tirelessly to solidify her place within the monarchy, this was more than procedural inconvenience. It was symbolic displacement. The humiliation was sharpened by its restraint. There was no official statement, no public acknowledgement to frame the moment. Outwardly, nothing appeared to change. Engagements would continue, appearances would proceed. Yet internally, the hierarchy had adjusted. Camilla had been removed from a position of priority without a single announcement. That quiet exclusion cut deeper than any headline ever could. Whispers began circulating almost instantly among aides and advisors. The phrase, transition protocol, surfaced in hushed conversations, suggesting this was not spontaneous, but part of a broader restructuring. If that is true, then the locked door was only the visible tip of a far larger recalibration, and Camilla, seasoned though she is, would have recognized the pattern. Institutions do not shift abruptly. They prepare, align, and then execute. What happened next remains known only to a select few. Did anger flash behind closed doors, or did stunned composure prevail? Those who understand palace survival know that visible outrage rarely serves one's position. Restraint can be more strategic than confrontation, yet even restraint cannot erase the emotional fracture of realizing that the system you defended has moved beyond you. The locked vault door, N, stands as a symbol far greater than steel and code. It represents a boundary redrawn, a message delivered without words. It tells a story of authority recalibrated and loyalty weighed against longevity. And for Camilla, that door is not just an obstacle, it is a reminder that within the monarchy, permanence belongs to the institution, not the individual. But while Camilla stood outside the vault, another force inside the palace had been preparing for this very shift. Princess Anne has never been loud, but she has always been decisive. And those who track palace influence say this move carries her fingerprints. For years, she has guarded the institution with surgical precision. If Catherine now holds the master code, it may not be coincidence, it may be design. Because Anne understands something others often forget: survival requires foresight. Unlike figures who command attention through spectacle, Anne exerts influence through constancy. She does not chase headlines. She studies patterns. For decades, she has operated as the monarchy's internal compass, quietly steering conversations back to duty when distraction threatened to derail focus. Her understanding of institutional fragility runs deep. She has witnessed public trust rise and fall, reputations crumble, and alliances fracture. Through it all, her priority has remained unwavering: protect the crown, not the comfort of individuals within it. Within internal policy discussions, Anne's voice often carries a gravity that few challenge. She is known for asking the uncomfortable questions, for pressing beyond sentiment and into consequence. What preserves continuity? What safeguards legitimacy? What strengthens public confidence over time? These are not abstract concerns for her. They are operational necessities. If the master code transfer unfolded with calculated timing, it reflects a philosophy she has championed for years, that authority must align with stability. Her alignment with Catherine has not been theatrical, but it has been consistent. Observers inside palace circles describe a shared temperament between them: disciplined, composed, resistant to impulsive displays. Catherine's calm under scrutiny mirrors Anne's own long-standing resilience. That similarity is not accidental, it is complementary. Where one represents seasoned institutional memory, the other embodies generational renewal. Together, they form a strategic bridge between past and future. Anne has also been acutely aware of the risks posed by eroding public trust. In a modern monarchy, perception is currency. If confidence weakens, tradition alone cannot sustain authority. She understands that safeguarding the institution sometimes requires difficult recalibrations, even when those recalibrations unsettle established hierarchies. The vault in this context is not simply a secure chamber. It is a symbol of continuity. Whoever controls it safeguards the narrative of permanence. In recent months, subtle restructuring within palace operations hints at Anne's patient groundwork: advisory roles adjusted, access privileges reviewed, decision-making pathways streamlined. None of these moves sparked public attention. That is precisely the point. True strategic shifts rarely announce themselves. They accumulate quietly until their effect becomes undeniable. The Master Code transfer feels less like an isolated act and more like the culmination of long-term positioning. Anne's strength has always been patience. She does not react impulsively to crisis. She anticipates it. If she perceived a vulnerability within their existing structure, she would not wait for it to fracture publicly. She would reinforce it from within. Catherine's elevation, therefore, may represent not favoritism, but foresight and investment in continuity that prioritizes the crown's endurance over temporary equilibrium. And so the narrative deepens. The vault door that closed on Camilla may have been triggered by protocol, but protocol itself may have been shaped by a steady, deliberate hand. And strategic patience, long underestimated, appears to have surfaced at precisely the moment the monarchy required recalibration. And as internal alliances solidified, the public began to sense that something unprecedented was unfolding. The palace issued no statement, no press alert, yet within hours, whispers became headlines. Something had changed. Observers noticed subtle shifts in protocol. Engagements were reassigned, access patterns altered, and suddenly the question was everywhere: had the monarchy just initiated a controlled transition? Because when vault authority moves, the future of the crown quietly follows. At first, the signs were almost invisible. A scheduled appearance quietly adjusted. A briefing led by a different figure than expected. Seating orders refined with barely perceptible calculation. To the untrained eye, these were routine variations. But royal watchers are rarely untrained. They study tone, posture, proximity. They read between silences. And what they sensed was not chaos, but orchestration. Media outlets began piecing together fragments. Reports hinted at internal restructuring. Commentators debated whether this was modernization or maneuvering. Analysts asked whether the reassignment of vault authority signaled something far more deliberate than operational efficiency. The palace, when pressed, described it as administrative alignment. But that phrase, calm and neutral, only intensified curiosity. Administrative adjustments do not usually carry the weight of seismic consequence. Public sentiment quickly gravitated toward Catherine. Her composure, her steady presence, her alignment with continuity, these qualities resonated deeply with a nation sensitive to uncertainty. In moments of perceived transition, people look for anchors. Catherine has become that anchor in the public imagination. Her rise feels less abrupt and more inevitable, as though the institution has quietly aligned itself with the figure many already view as its future. At the same time, conversation surrounding Camilla shifted in tone. There was no overt condemnation, but there was an unmistakable recalibration. Her visibility seemed to narrow. Her presence, once central in certain engagements, appeared subtly reduced. Speculation swirled, not about scandal, but about positioning. Was this a graceful step back, or an enforced one? The absence of clarity only sharpened the debate. The monarchy, seasoned in weathering scrutiny, responded with restraint. No dramatic announcements, no public confirmation of power shifts. Instead, a measured insistence that everything remained stable. Yet stability in royal terms does not preclude strategy. In fact, strategy often hides beneath the language of normalcy. And when authority over the vault changes hands, history suggests that the institution is preparing for something. Analysts began raising the possibility of early succession positioning. Not in the formal sense, but in the structural sense. Authority, after all, does not materialize overnight. It is cultivated gradually. If Catherine now safeguards the most guarded chamber of the crown, then she is being entrusted with more than ceremonial responsibility. She is being positioned. That realization carries emotional weight for the public. The monarchy is not merely a political entity. It is a symbol woven into national identity. Any perceived shift touches something deeper: tradition, continuity, belonging. And when people sense that a new chapter may be unfolding, they respond not just with curiosity, but with emotion. Tension now hums beneath the surface. What comes next? Will the palace maintain its silence? Will further recalibration surface quietly, one by one? The absence of explicit confirmation only heightens anticipation. Because when the system moves without spectacle, it often signals preparation rather than reaction. But beneath speculation lies the deeper question: what exactly does control of the royal vault truly mean? The royal vault holds more than crowns and heirlooms. It holds history, private directives, letters never meant for public eyes, authority embedded in tradition. Control of that vault is not ornamental, it is strategic. And when Catherine received the Master Code, she inherited something far more powerful than access. She inherited leverage. For generations, the vault has functioned as the monarchy's silent archive of continuity. Within it rest documents that clarify succession in times of uncertainty, private memoranda that shape internal decisions, and symbolic treasures that reinforce legitimacy when doubt begins to whisper. It is the institutional memory of the crown, preserved not for ceremony, but for preservation. To control that chamber is to safeguard not just artifacts, but the narrative of the monarchy itself. Access, in this context, equals influence. The one entrusted with entry gains proximity to the levers that quietly steer the future. Decisions about preservation, disclosure, and timing do not exist in isolation. They shape perception and direction. When Catherine accepted the Master Code, she stepped into that sphere of quiet authority. She did not merely open a door, she stepped into a position from which long-term strategy can be guided. Camilla's exclusion, therefore, carries structural meaning. It is not a theatrical demotion, not a public stripping of title. It is subtler than that. It represents a recalibration of priority. When access shifts, influence follows. The denial at the vault was not only about security. It was about signaling who now stands closest to the crown's enduring legacy. That message, though unspoken, is unmistakable. Catherine's new role positions her as guardian of continuity. In times when public scrutiny is relentless and institutional stability feels fragile, the monarchy appears to have aligned its most guarded trust with the figure seen as its future. That alignment secures more than today's operations. It safeguards tomorrow's perception. And perception within a constitutional monarchy often determines survival. For Charles, this move may secure his own legacy in ways that few outside palace walls fully grasp. By aligning authority with the figure who represents generational stability, He reinforces the continuity of his reign beyond his lifetime. History tends to remember sovereigns not only for their challenges, but for how they prepared the path ahead. If the master code transfer reflects his approval, then it also reflects a calculated effort to protect the institution from turbulence yet to come. Princess Anne's influence, long understated, now appears validated. Her steady emphasis on foresight over sentiment echoes through this decision. The strategy she has quietly championed, fortifying the crown against erosion of trust, seems embedded in this recalibration. The vault, once simply a guarded chamber, has become the stage upon which generational strategy has been revealed. This moment marks an irreversible shift, not because of spectacle, but because of structure. Authority has been reallocated. Trust has been redefined. The center of institutional gravity has moved. And when such movement occurs within a monarchy, it rarely returns to its previous alignment. The vault stands sealed, not just as a security measure, but as a symbol of transition already in motion. And now, with the vault sealed and the master code reassigned, the monarchy stands at a crossroads it can never publicly acknowledge. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.